Okay, and we are back for part 2 of this backtesting session. Left off reanalyzing the high time frame on a lot of these pairs with some new perspective here on Doge right here. So we're analyzing this compression, and I started realizing that this, although the move up initially was super aggressive, and I was just viewing this as the first move fake move. I was using this as the first move fake move, with this demand being a fake demand, to see the rotation down. But instead, we locally accumulated here, coming into that crucial POI, and got the move up into a third tap POI for this internal distribution. So I didn't trade this internal distribution, but I am interested in seeing if we can get an entry on a local move up inside of here. Reason I didn't trade, honestly, is because I wasn't looking at it from this perspective in the moment. Now, it looks pretty clean. It is very internal. Of course, you like to see that main high get taken, but when you have those clean compressions, you can get that internal model. And most recently, we saw price coming up here, and this is your extreme supply now. So we could find an entry on this retest, and it could be even higher probability because of this local pullback we're getting. On this move up, it wasn't super, it was a bit aggressive, and you swept liquidity prior to getting a fairly aggressive move up. If you entered on that break, there was some demand below you. All around, though, it wasn't a horrible entry. But there is also the perspective, so this is how I'm viewing it in the moment. But I also am aware of the fact that we are also compressing on the higher time frame, like this. So whether this isn't actually an internal distribution and this ends up just being a compression where you then get the first move fake move, or first move fake move, we're gonna see. But I would be interested in shorting this local pullback if we can come into here, especially if we can create a local model coming into here. That's going to be ideal. Yep. Okay. Cleaning everything up. Doge here. Viewing this overall range, I was making a comparison to how this is very similar to that recent price action we had on Pump Fun. You can see that in the last video, where you have a buy to sell to buy to sell, and in this time I did see this. It's very uncommon to see a 4-peat move like this, but in the time we did see it, this got a continuation to the downside, or in the case of Pump Fun, this whole thing was reversed and it got a continuation to the upside. And it was even very similar with having a distribution in Pump Fun's case, right there starting the entire move. So yeah, kind of just viewing this as overall neutral context on Doge. We're in a bit of a compression. We're in the discount section of a range. This is one of the pairs that the distribution looks the least nice in this, just from a context perspective. XRP ranging, I would really like to see this low now get taken, just with how we're ranging inside of here. It doesn't have to happen. I'm also watching this range right here. So we can see we have that market maker, somewhat of a market maker continuation model that hasn't yet come to completion. But you got that aggressive move up and then the aggressive move down. So if you can get a distribution, we could potentially short that down to this range low. there wasn't really much but liquidity with inside of here. That's why this third tap was one low probability trade, because of the lack in the third tap POI, and also because of, just the aggressiveness of the move didn't really allow for an entry. End up kind of using this built liquidity as the third tap POI there. So yeah, watching this local range here, we'll be interested in distribution, but mostly interested in ETH, Bitcoin, and Solana for distributions here locally. With Bitcoin potentially having that first move, fake move, that may want to go over into a larger range, since the move didn't actually sweep any liquidity. It could also want to go into a larger compression, as I was discussing. So yeah, these are some of the scenarios we're watching. Just going to trade it level by level. I think I'm going to watch locally. I'm going to watch how ETH decides to come up here, because I am viewing this as somewhat of a distribution slash PO3 here, where the manipulation phase on this wasn't ideal to trade. It was, a bit ugly. You have to make a lot of exceptions to really call that a manipulation. But, the overall price action is pretty clear, and it aligns with, move down on Bitcoin. So if we can get that slow move up, ideally a local model inside of here, then I will look to short that. Because you did just sweep your extreme liquidity of the macro distributive range. And I can highlight this extreme demand, but I really don't want to see it come that deep. If we start coming super deep here, I'm going to be picky with the confirmations I'm looking for. It's actually extreme supply, not demand. I'm going to be picky with the confirmations I'm looking for here. I don't want to see this come too far out of the range, or I'd rather just repull the range from that perspective, and that can create an even higher probability play of, price tapping into the extreme supply with, this model that has some exhaustion. Because currently, just SFPing the market structure high into a nice local POI after having somewhat of an extended move to the downside. So it's pretty similar to context to that distribution we took on XRP right here, where you took the swing high, you got the local move down, and then you got the distribution SFPing that market structure high, continuing with the downtrend, where, locally it is that semi-counter context, because you're getting a move down, an extended move down, but on the higher time frame you're semi-pro, because you just swept a key point, and you're also, locally coming up SFPing that market structure high, so it's not like you're distributing within that first supply zone. You actually SFP'd the market structure high. Gonna remove some of this just to clean things up. Yeah. So, start clicking through these candles. Hopefully we got multiple things developing, so hopefully we do not miss anything in the process. Seeing if we can get that move up. XRP already coming down. Yeah, so really just looking for that range low sweep for potential accumulation there. somewhat of a distribution here on ETH. Front running the extreme liquidity, but you are in that confirmed PO3. At least I'm viewing it as a confirmed PO3, just with the it's not being the highest probability PO3, just in a good location and decent price action overall. Not really seeing. Yeah, you could look at this for sure. Extreme supply mitigation with the extreme liquidity sweep. Prior to then creating another extreme POI that we came into on that pullback. And now we're getting a pretty aggressive move up. What is the time frame of this? Not bad. Some sort of an EHP here. Looking at it from the exact entry. Honestly, it looks pretty solid. Of course, we already kind of got a spoil that it's sweeping the low and reversing up pretty aggressively. So this definitely could just be some exhaustion prior to creating your actual range. Yeah, I mean, this was definitely one of the scenarios we said that we would trade. A confirmed distribution, within the order flow expectation of the PO3. Call that pro context on ETH. Although we are locally front running the POI. Nice supply creation there. Yeah, I mean, seeming like it's meeting the requirements. This exact moment, Bitcoin is simply I would call this a semi-pro context. Locally, you're a bit neutral, just kind of being in a range. But on the higher time frame, we are expecting this to be the first move, fake move, prior to a reversal down. But like I said, that could go into a higher time frame, first move, fake move, that actually sweeps some of this liquidity. That would be a bit nicer. But you don't always have to get that. Maybe if the intention of this local first move, fake move is to come down and then create an accumulation, it will want to leave that liquidity intact, and you'll just want to get a little pop out of that compression. So it's somewhat neutral context on Bitcoin. But yeah, I would say this is definitely a valid trade to enter. Let me double check everything from a checklist perspective. Run through context. We're going to call that pro context. But the PO3 is a bit ugly, and the local model is front running the optimal extreme liquidity POI. Return to zone is pretty good. You got 1, 2, 3, 4 primary lows. I don't think there's much. Let me look. I don't think there's really a whole lot of supply here. It's not seeming to be. Ooh, the entry timing. Ooh, I don't like that entry timing. I actually might not take this purely due to the entry timing. That weekly open, I've seen so many trades spike up and fail. That confirmed right before the weekly open during that after hours, and then the weekly open just makes price either move up and it fails, and then it gets a reconfirmation, or it simply just fails and goes higher. That's good to check. Okay. Yeah, I definitely have journaled that many times that is not the best context, especially when you have some room for error within the model. Say we got a confirmation on New York earlier on that Sunday. I have seen that work for sure, but that after hours prior to the weekly open, and also this Saturday, Asia can provide some good confirmations. Just, weekend timing. But, if this push up had happened on the weekly open, that would have been nicer. So, I mean, right now, trying to think if there's a potential entry that I would be interested in taking upon the week opening. So this is a 45-minute model, 1 hour model. That's the extent. Yeah, so this model is valid on the 1 hour time frame. We did get a nice zone creation, so technically we can trade an extended tap. It can't be too local though. It has to be valid on the 30-minute. Yeah, it has to be valid on the 30-minute at least. Yeah, I think I'm going to pass on it simply due to the timing there. And just see how that week opens. And if it ends up playing out, I'm going to definitely put that down in the journal that we did see a model play out with that timing, but I've seen it fail too many times. But yeah, I mean, we do have this POI creation here that if we can spike up on the weekly open into and get a confirmation, which we kind of already saw price partially doing that, we could potentially look to get involved. And if you come for the model 1 or if you come for this POI up higher, that can be nice as well. But yeah, let me double check where everything is at going into this weekly open. So still in that range. Doge still in that range. Doge, although it has that semi-counter context, you could still trade it if we see Bitcoin coming up and like sweeping this high, for example, and creating a locally, or maybe we keep compressing here and then Bitcoin gets a pop up, and you can locally look at that as a first move, fake move, just some local semi-pro environment on Bitcoin. You can take the semi-counter context trade on Doge. Getting a couple alerts in the regular market. Seeing things getting a spike up. Watching this model in Pump Fun. That's interesting. Put in a higher low. I'm not going to focus on this too much. Yeah. Sorry for the delay, but I do have to prioritize the live price action. So yeah, we could get something there on Doge. The XRP is still just in this range. Similar context to Doge, though not the greatest context, but a bit better than Doge, I'd say. So yeah, gonna see how the week opens. The weekly open is right here. As far as I'm aware, it might be right here. Depending on the time zone we're in. Depending on daylight savings. Oh. And wow, and that completed very nicely. Yes, I'm definitely going to be noting this one down in my journal. Because like I was saying, this was a completely valid trade. It was just the timing that I didn't like, because I've seen models fail very often within that timing. But it seems that, you know, like when you have that no room for error model, let's get that nice back test. When you have a no room for error model, regardless of the timing, it can still work out. So Bitcoin is continuing to the downside there. Yeah, this would have been a nice one to be in on ETH. What was that? RR was pretty solid there. 3.88 to the technical target. De-risk the trade and let it run. Let me write a quick note for myself. Didn't take the entry due to timing after hours prior to weekly open. In the past, seeing models fail many times with this timing. This goes to show that they still can work, but you just gotta be very picky. Models with no room for error and good context. Just being more cautious and careful with the exact entry that you use. Yeah, because this would have been a very nice trade to be in. And definitely learned something new there. So I'm going to be journaling this one. Filling this in as a missed trade, just because, you know, looking at it, you can definitely see that, you know, all the high probability criteria were met. And that when that's the case, I'll just write that down. When all the high probability criteria is clearly met, timing doesn't matter, just execute. If you have to re-enter for L into a W, that's okay. Bang. So that's gonna be my key takeaway on this guy. But man, you can really see expectation order flow working there. Man, that's a clean looking model. See, when you see that aggressive follow through, the thing just looks so clean. Love to see that. So it's great to see the concepts working, and the overall idea of being in a confirmed P of 3, distributions a higher probability. Good to see that playing out. Did I check everything? Let's double check. XRP got the pop down. Week has now opened. Gonna be watching this range right here. This just looks ugly, so I'm gonna remove that. Yeah, gonna be watching for an accumulation here on XRP for sure. Sweeping this low doesn't seem like it's necessary. Got to keep in mind the overall bearish context though on the majors. Doge sweep the high. Did I put an equalize? Looks like I did. $7727, 7746. There's no way. 7746. 7746. Okay. Yeah, so I put an equalize there. I was calling a semi-counter, but just judging off that context that we already depicted, it is likely to get a rotation down to this low after having a buy to sell to buy to sell. Buy to sell to buy to sell. You're probably going to continue with that move as opposed to get another buy, because 4P moves are already so rare that if it happens, you're going to probably see some continuation or some consolidation in that region is my guess. So we're going to analyze that. I've only seen it once and it did have the continuation. So we're going to see if Doge also gets that, and then maybe we can journal that down as a pattern we're starting to notice. Solana did not provide an entry. You can see that this range right here ended up working. Bit ugly to trade. This would have been your ideal entry. We're going to see, though, if this model even can play out, because it is. Price is really compressing here overall. Like you could still see, a pop out or a pop down for a pop up, something like that. So I am taking this definitely as a confirmed model, but I do, oh, there you go. But I do want to see some aggressive follow through soon on it. And yeah, just like looking back at it, I didn't have the analysis calling it a model in the moment because it was just so internal. You know what I mean? It's not your typical model where you get the exhaustion, coming into a POI, for example. It was like a super internal model that had the very aggressive move into the third tap, and it was a super deep third tap that only really looks like a model once you get the breaker structure here and start seeing that follow through. And you're like, oh shit, like if this comes down, like that's a clean 1, 2, 3 within the compression breakout. So we're just analyzing too many pairs end up being the reason, and not like taking my time soon enough, because I still did notice it. We'll see if it plays out, but not taking time soon enough to identify that as a model. Pretty wide entry. Might have been like a 1 minute or something. Curious to see up inside of here. Wow. That is super aggressive. Something like that could honestly be an entry there. There's some inefficiency, but there's really no demand protecting price to coming down to this local market structure low right here. And that just gives a beautiful opportunity to de-risk. Like there's some inefficiencies in here. But yeah, for the most part, just straight liquidity there. Wow. Curious to see if this guy now completes a trade though. That could be, you know, very easily de-risked by now though if it was taken. You need to have that conviction though to enter in that moment. But truly, let's see, you had a demand zone here. You did have some demand. It wasn't a perfect move up. So this would have been the ideal opportunity. Doge going to move down after putting in equal highs. XRP potentially accumulating there. ETH, super clean model. ETH is really the entry, you know, for this local pivot where Bitcoin was neutral locally. And we're going to see if we can get that continuation with the follow through to the downside here. Gonna watch XRP in the meantime. Yeah. Man, we have been killing the expectation order flow, not the entries though, unfortunately. But you know, that'll come with time, you know. Now this is starting to look decent for an accumulation, especially with the semi-pro environment that may have just been established on BTC there. BTC still does have some room for lower. ETH still having some room for lower. So XRP, we'll watch it locally here, but and Solana, yeah, getting that move down. Doge sweeping that low, sweeping the low of this demand zone at the same time. So yeah, this is you don't want to see a model 1 here for sure. So that can be the nice thing about these models is like if it develops in a high probability fashion from here, which it's already a fairly aggressive move down. So like preferably you want to come all the way above this and really establish a nice return to zone. Trying to think if this would be enough for me. I'll have to see where Bitcoin's at in the moment. If Bitcoin still has that, and Bitcoin ETH still have that bearish order flow objective or expectation order flow, it's not going to be a trade for me there. I'll need to see a bit, you know, cleaner price action, something more convincing. Oh, here, actually, this is something good to journal. Similar to pump fun, buy to sell, buy to sell, buy to sell, to buy to sell. Played out in same way as pump fun as green shot. So I'm just gonna save this right now, just so I can add this into my notes of, you know, potential pattern that I'm starting to see. Just a note. I'll just be adding all this to my journal after, you know, the end of this session. But I'm gonna continue with the live price action for now. So yeah, we got Doge and XRP sweeping the range lows. XRP looking much better. Maybe we can see, you know, some more shorts on the main pairs, especially maybe even a short on XRP in confluence with these main pairs coming into one of these POIs. I think we also have supply right here. Bitcoin getting an even further expansion to the downside while XRP makes a higher low. Like this higher low was put in on 145. This lower low right here is put in on 145. So that's interesting to note. Doge also doing the same. ETH putting in a lower low similar to Bitcoin. I'm going to check how we're looking in that overall higher time frame compression. See if that may take precedence. Yeah, honestly, looking like we're popping out of it potentially. Maybe not though. Maybe you could, if you continue compressing here, then we'll have such a crazy compression. I'll truly start like looking at whatever the next move is. It's gonna be a fake move, regardless of the direction. But for now, we're just gonna keep with this TA. We could already be having that first move, fake move here with this being the compression, but I'm not fully convinced by that. So yeah, locally here, if we start ranging, then I'll be looking towards Bitcoin and Ethereum, you know, the pairs with the order flow objective, and Solana for some distributions if we start getting, you know, some nice moves away. Even on XRP, honestly, all these pairs could locally distribute in their supply zones. Yeah, coming lower. Tapping into that key POI right there. Bitcoin coming lower. Solana. Yep. Completing that distribution. That was nice identification by us, just a bit late. So yeah, this will definitely be a nice one to journal. I call this missed trade 2. Yeah, some nice POIs if we do get retracements. Something I've definitely noticed as well, this is another example of when you have that super aggressive move up into your second tap, and then the return to zone and like the overall, you know, slower move up and the structure move up happens on the move into the third tap, where, you know, this didn't actually have a crazy return to zone build, but just some of the models I've noticed that play out in a similar context, they have that super tight like local return to zone right here, right before the pop. The pop happens fairly low in the range, where they have that nice return to zone starting down there, and then they come back and they mitigate all the way down into that demand POI that started that pop up, and they have that local return to zone there. I think we had a very similar outcome on a model we had on Solana in where was that? Was that this one? No. Oh, that was this right here. Yeah, we had something very similar right here. Right here very recently, where we had that local return to zone. We had your demand right here that started that pop-up. The entire London session just pushing price up from this low all the way up to there. So we can just label the entire thing. And you even had some sort of a distribution model right there. Super low time frame. I'm really not trying to zoom in, so I have to keep going back. But yeah, you had some sort of a topping formation, similar to how the other one had a distribution model. And then, you got the move up, where initially when I was watching this, I was just viewing it as a market structure continuation, because you kind of got an aggressive move there, then slow move down, aggressive move there, where, I was looking at it more as just, in this moment right here, I'm looking at it as a market structure continuation. And then you get the move down, and I'm still looking at it as just, price trending up because of that aggressive move. So that's something I definitely noticed for myself, where like you can get that aggressive pop into your range high and it just looks like market structure, but then you end up creating that nice return to zone into the third tap, and it's a distribution. And we were in that semi-pro context there. So I ended up creating this nice distribution. So Solana's been having some nice price action. Clean, super clean third tap POI there. Doesn't get more clear than that. With the distribution model above on the deep tap, it's really letting me know that, with the aggressive acceptance back in and nice POI creation, really letting you know that that was a deviation. Popping out of the compression, like this could potentially be like a 36 RR trade. We're gonna see how this progresses. Okay. Assuming Doge went lower too. What's going on? So Doge, yeah, we're definitely just building liquidity on either end on Doge, and locally sweeping the lows. So, usually if you are seeing a lot of exhaustion to the downside, either you're going to get a partial reversal, sweeping some liquidity to fuel the continuation of the trend, or you'll just get an aggressive move away from that exhaustion environment, leaving all that liquidity intact. Man, we've been nailing the expectation of order flow. So like, although we haven't caught any trades, due to a few reasons, and he actually caught any of the entries, it's still something to be proud of, and still something to just like see the progress in your work when you out loud determine the expectation of order flow and the context as price is progressing on all these different pairs, and then you see it come to fruition. It feels good to see. Feels good to see price respecting the TA. We still have some ways to go locally here though. And it's also nice to see that there was clean entries. That was a super clean entry. Solana, super clean model right here. Very clear third tap POI. That's what can give you the confidence to short such a low time frame breaker structure right there, when you have such a clean POI. And you're also sweeping this local swing high in combination with, that one took the extreme liquidity. This is kind of a little bit of a sketchy break right here, because you're already, not super confident in the overall model with, the fact that it's internal, and that this, I don't know if this was deviating tap one and it's front running tap one, and then you get the deviation in tap one, sweeping the local swing high, perfectly tapping that really clean extreme supply POI that's also market maker supply. And you're already expecting, if this model is to play out, since price spent so much time and had such a deep deviation here on tap two, almost always, if the model is intended to play out, tap 3 is a model 2, is going to be a model 2, not a model 1, and it's going to be, it's going to tap in to the lowest section of the PY that deviates tap 1. So definitely something to note there. Not really seeing a whole lot to trade on any of these, so I'll just let Bitcoin, just watch Bitcoin locally here. If we start getting to move up, that can be nice for shorts. Not too convinced that that's going to happen. If you start sweeping a low with an accumulation, that can definitely be a trade. Once Bitcoin hits this range low, though, shifts the order flow expectation to neutral, and it could even be semi-pro because this is technically this is still, part of the compression where this was the first move, fake move. And you could start to look for accumulations across the board and even within this larger range. But yeah, locally, highest probability formation could be a move up here. Yeah, you really don't want to be shorting the bottom of the pivot. One pull of local exhaustion is nice. Preferably you'd want to come up to a POI higher. Ooh, ETH is redistributing here, and this is actually looking kind of clean. Hold on. What kind of model is this, man? Preferably you want to short the top of the pivot. That's what allows the highest RR opportunities. Let me just zoom it back a bit. It kind of gets spoiled for you when you're trading all these different pairs, and you got to go between, oh shit, there's a model there. But we're just going to analyze it from there. This is just such a clean return to zone. We are within a rounding up bottom. So, the probabilities of this playing out are definitely lower now than, just from a model perspective. I was talking about the timing, but definitely lower than something like this that's up in the upper section of the range. But you do have some exhaustion coming into it. 3 pulls to be exact. Model 1 flowing into a Model 2 here. Valid, 1 day range. See if we got a nice Model 2 POI. Just simply this extreme liquidity POI right here. Anything in the pivot. Check the 30-second for any. You kind of have something. Seeming like. You got this 15-second supply overlapping. Beautiful. Market structure low there. Okay. Some sort of also a range creation. I want to note that down. Some sort of a range creation right here. So if, we come up and we get like a test kind of vibe, that can also be an entry. If you come up and then you're coming down, working into it. Yeah, we're just going to look for the breaker structure there. God, look at this return to zone. We still have that confirmed order flow objective, although we are in the discount section of the range, and we swept the extreme liquidity. Technically, yeah, you still have that confirmed order flow expectation of coming down there, and this could have room to run lower, just given the overall, not this necessarily, but this PO3 could have room to run lower, given the overall context of sweeping the extreme liquidity of the macro range. But this guy, I'll just play locally. If we can see a proper break. Ooh, 1.93. It's a bit low. That technically can be your trade. I would take like a 50 there, 50 there. At minimum. But yeah, this is seeming like a valid trade. Coming into that supply zone there. Of course, something like this would be your highest probability location for a retracement short. Having some really nice POIs above you. But in the PO3, you're expecting the pretty aggressive completion, and you have the aggressive move, pullback, aggressive move, pullback. Like, do you think you're gonna get the completion here and then another pullback? Like, it can happen, but I wouldn't be surprised just to see the PO3 complete using this model as the fuel to, you know, drive price down to that low. Checking some of these other pairs. Bitcoin's also sweeping a local high, so that's a nice confluence for the ETH entry. Okay. Analysis is done there. This is right on Asia open. You pushed up right on it, right as Asia started. You had that move up. You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then all these internals, 7 primaries with all those internals. Context, still in that pro context. Locally, even semi-counter, or so semi-pro, but you are at the bottom of the pivot, so kind of like a little bit of both. Turn to zone's amazing. Range duration was at 1 day. 1 day, 35 minutes. Just leave it at 1 day. Tap displacement's clean. Third tap POI is clean. Range and efficiency. Checking out this volume profile here. We are getting a break inside of volume. No range and efficiency, but yes, on the break inside of volume. Supply demand creation. Check the lower time frame for that. Does not look like we have that. Getting some, you know, pretty aggressiveness with that sharp move, clean invalidation, nice, decent price displacement right there on that close. Timing is good. Confluence is that you're sweeping that local high, so that's semi-pro on the confluence. Also with the bearish order flow expectation on Bitcoin, I would say call that a semi-pro confluence. Although you're near the bottom of the pivot. You're nearing that bottom of that extended move down, so that's something you definitely want to note. But yeah, I would take this. so we can see if it ends up playing out. Popping down. This is where you can go risk off. See what we get here. This could develop into something. Seeing that overlapping with this. With this being a letter, it kind of looks ugly, but it did have a nice inefficiency there. Bit of an uglier POI. Doge having a similar distribution. This is pretty clean as well. You call that a confirmed distribution here on Doge? I actually watched Doge right here for a re-entry. 19 hours, not bad. Come on. See if we can get the overall rotation up there. What the hell? So is that ETH getting stopped? Okay, well, that trade was risk-free. God damn. Man, we are not getting fortunate entries here. Trade one. So we got the mistrade, we got the trade there. Keep it organized for the journal. Getting these moves up is not a bad thing though, because we can start looking for some, you know, more shorts. Well, let me double check. Getting the extreme liquidity sweep prior to this redistribution, and it failed. I'm gonna write that note down. Although price was in confirmed distribution, it had just gotten the extreme liquidity swept and created this model nearing the range below. And kind of like what I'm seeing here is like, since this one still failed, when you're in this kind of context, you do want to be careful and only take the highest probability of model, which this one, you know, is super clean, like amazing return to zone, nice deviations, nice break of structure, stuff like that, right? Break in volume, you know, that local exhaustion coming into it, confirmed order flow objective, you know, you still want the model to be super clean, or you need the model to be super clean, even if you have that confirmed order flow objective, if you have just swept the extreme liquidity. Some typos there, but yeah. point is made, getting that move up. We can look at it from a bearish perspective. Let me double check on what Bitcoin's doing. Bitcoin still is front running that extreme liquidity with, you know, more liquidity creation down here, these lows. Gotta be aware of this though. And double check. It's like given this compression, for some reason I'm tripping right now. I don't think you can draw this range. It's a bit of a weird scenario. Cause like it looks like right here, boom, you got that structure trending down. But prior to this starting point, like this is just a random starting point. It's not your high, it's not your swing high. Your swing high is right here, with this being the low. And then, you know, from there, there's nothing, you know? It's a tricky scenario. I don't think this is valid structure. Like you have that structure. Like, you look at your swing low, you go up, you know, there's no structure up. So then you look at that, you know, that high down, and there's no structure down. So everything here is just internal. But yeah, that's interesting. That's me confused. Maybe I'm just burnt out and I'll just look at this in the morning and or the next day or whatever and just be like, oh yeah, that's obviously structure, that obviously not structure. But yeah, I think I'm at an hour. I already did another like 45 minutes in the other one, so I'm nearing the end of this backtesting session. Took some trades, made some good, you know, identifications. We're getting an expansive move locally, so you know, we're gonna have to see how price ends up playing out from there. Checking in on these pairs. A lot of these, you know, we can look for distributions on that move up. Bitcoin's environment could potentially be starting to turn bullish, where this could be, you know, that local first move fake move for the real first move fake move before getting rotation up. Although this isn't super convincing price action to confirm that rotation up. You know, preferably if you come down here and you accumulate, this could be really nice. You know, sweeping this low, this could be really nice to confirm a rotation back up to this high, given that this was your real first move fake move. Kind of how I'm starting to view that. We'll see though. We're gonna have to see how it progresses. You know, of course, even if that is the case to happen, you know, we can still trade that pivot at the high. So we're looking for distributions on this move up. And yeah, appreciate you guys for watching.